Tim, tomorrow they are back on the gridiron, the 2021 season getting underway. And, one of the special things about having you on, a guy that was the SID at Clemson for, in that department for 40 plus years, is thinking about the days that lead up to this for those guys. So give us the backdrop. What has it been like for Ross and the rest of that staff as they're preparing for day one of the 2021 campaign?
Well, when they talk about when does the summer end for an SID, it probably ended when they went to the football kickoff in Charlotte. Although I think they had one more weekend of freedom this past weekend. I think Brian Hennessy, who also works with Ross in football, had a little vacation with his family. So, but yeah, once tomorrow hits, then you're locked down. Now, I'll be honest with you. I hated the month of August. Why was that? Because at that time, it was 29 straight practices without a game. Oh. It seemed like there was no end. You go out to practice, and it seemed like it was the same drills every day. And, and when I started, and really most of my career, I had to write a story about practice every day. And it just got, you had to try to come up with something new every day. Sure, you sprinkled in what the coach said, what the injury situation was. But I couldn't wait for that first game to come. And especially this year with such an exciting game playing the University of Georgia.
Oh, look, there's no doubt about that with Clemson and Georgia hooking up. And, I kind of wonder just from your time there, when you arrive at Clemson, they win the national title a few years later. There had to certainly be this huge buzz, I would assume, even though the media was different and everything around the program. But then, things taper off a little bit in the late 80s, early 90s. Do you see from that standpoint, from the SID, like a dip in the expectations of media availability and the calls that you get? Because I can't imagine right now what they deal with Coach Sweeney in terms of guys like me clamoring to get him on their shows.
Yeah, you're right. It's an interesting point that you bring up because I've kind of noticed we've seen, there's fewer newspaper guys. There's less and less staffs of newspapers, but that's just kind of transferred over to internet sites. There's really the same amount of media, different media that are covering Clemson now that there were, in the 1980s. The difference is there's just not the newspaper people that you used to have. We used to have the bus tour and the ACC that was from August 15th to the 27th, and there would be 30 guys in a bus, and they'd go from school to school, and it was great publicity, because you'd get stories in all kind of papers around the ACC area that you wouldn't normally get. But you're right from the standpoint that the program has been so strong, especially the last 6 years, that there's more and more national media. But you know what? I had that with Danny Ford in the 1980s. We'd have national media come in during the month of August. Certainly in the 80s when we were the fifth winningest program in college football.
Talking with Tim Bourret, legendary Clemson SID. He's on Twitter at Tim Bourret, giving us the inside look at the preseason camps. And, of course, the big weigh-in was today. And, that's another thing that has kind of gotten a life of its own. I don't remember, Tim, big weigh-ins prior to Dabo Sweeney being a part of this program. But now it's like Tiger fans are waiting at a buffet just to find out how much the starting left tackle is going to weigh heading into the college football campaign.
That's another thing. It's interesting how times have changed when you bring that up. So, we always had that. I mean, Coach Ford had a weigh-in the day before camp, but there was no publicity about it because, quite frankly, we didn't want people to know how much William Perry weighed going into his junior and senior year. It was kind of a secret because, in all fairness to William, everything was different. That you didn't have the off-season programs. I remember William said when he was at the, Bears camp, and it was the same way when it was Clemson. That's what preseason camp was for, to get in shape. So he might have reported at 340, but he was 310 by the time we, kicked it off. Now his senior year, he was a little bit more than that. But now, of course, with social media and you try to generate publicity for your program, Clemson will turn in the big weigh-in into something that they will publicize. And quite frankly, you don't have hardly any overweight guys anymore. So there's just no problem with releasing what the weights are.
It is pretty incredible to see how these guys get transformed now too. Just the strength and conditioning and the food and nutrition programs that are kind of built in and around the football programs, not only at Clemson, but across the country. That's certainly got to be, I would imagine, one of the bigger changes you've probably seen, right? Is just the whole scale of how substantial a part of a program that is.
Well, strength training really kind of got going in the late 70s and early 80s. George Dostal was really the first strength coach we had at Clemson, and he really got things going. I remember, he got a lot of attention, and he was a very personable guy, and got a lot of attention. He put a sign up in the weight room, and before the 1981 season, he said, "The goal, Clemson versus Nebraska, 1981 Orange Bowl."
Wow.
And that's exactly what happened. But so we had weight training and all that, back then. But the nutrition, that's the thing that's really come on strong here in the last, 4, 5, 6 years. That's really made a huge difference with all the guys. And it's been a great, really with all the sports at Clemson. It's been, I won't call it an innovation because everybody just seems to be doing it now, but I tell you, it's a growing occupation in athletic departments. And now the people are more and more, they're hiring nutritionists to oversee all the sports, not just football.
So on a personal note, if they're having lobster, I mean, can you go have lobster? Like, how does that work? Can Tim Bourret go get lobster and steak when the football team's having lobster and steak?
Well, before the pandemic, I could.
Oh.
So I don't know what the deal's going to be.
You get a to-go box.
In all seriousness, since I'm not full-time anymore, I can go to practice when I want to, since I'm doing the games on the radio, and if I go in there and grab a bite to eat afterwards, they're not going to throw me out, but I don't abuse that privilege. Now I will try to go to the Wednesday night family dinner when they have it, but again, we did not have that at all last year during the pandemic, or at least for people like me who aren't full-time anymore, but I have partaken in some very nice meals in there over the years.
Well, I would say, you've earned it. It's when you start bringing out like a carry-out box to schlubs like me is when they start questioning things, right?
Yeah, probably not going to do that. But yeah, if Dabo gave me a golf cart for my retirement, he's probably not going to throw me out of the dining hall for an occasional meal here and there. But but I don't abuse the privilege.
I heard that. Tim Bourret with us here on the show that shakes the Southland today as we get geared up. And Tim, less than a month away from one of the most highly anticipated matchups in an opener in a long time, not just for Clemson, but nationally. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I haven't double-checked this yet, but that tells you how busy I am. But he was saying that this is the first matchup, they believe, between two top 5 teams since that matchup a few years ago between Alabama and Florida State that was over in Atlanta with Francois and those guys taking on the Crimson Tide. That's huge if indeed both of these teams do end up inside the top 5 to open the season. And I think most people would expect that at this point.
Yeah, I would think that to happen. Now, of course, the Clemson Georgia game in 2013 was really big. I think that was a number 8 versus a number 5. But I do want to get not off track, but I do want to make the point that with that statement that you just made about, oh, this is going to be a top 5 matchup. We're all excited about Clemson, Georgia. One of the reasons we're excited about Clemson, Georgia is because there are preseason rankings. For all you people out there who don't think there should be polls until October, this is why you have polls, because it stimulates interest in these games. If there was no poll, we really wouldn't know for sure how big a game this is. There'd be no way to quantify it. And that's important that you have a way to quantify it through the polls. Sure, things are going to change as the season goes on, but I still think polls are important in the promotion of college football.
Tim, one of the areas of this Clemson Tiger team that we haven't talked about a whole lot here with you is replacing Travis Etienne. And obviously the all-time leading rusher in the history of the ACC over the past, over the final 2 seasons, really tried to add a little bit of the, catching the ball in the backfield to his game, to his repertoire, if you will. But this season, most of the media types, such as myself, believe this is going to be, running back group by committee. And it's not to say that it was solely ETN over the past few years. Everybody knows that. But, I mean, where do you kind of fall when you look at this Clemson roster at running back in 2021, as they got some young guys that people expect to see a lot out of? And then, of course, Lynn J. Dixon kind of being the head of the snake there, at least out of the gates in most people's perspectives.
Yeah, you're right. Now let's look back at the history of Dabo Swinney in regards to the running back position. He really hasn't had a running back by committee situation. Now, the only thing that was close was 2014. Now, by the end of that season, Gallman was the guy. He had 185 yards against South Carolina. But, at midseason, Choice had beaten him out, right? Wasn't it Choice? And he suffered a torn ACL up at Boston College, and his season was over, and then Gallman ended up being the guy. But, every other year, there's been a guy. So I still think at some point by midseason, we're going to have a guy. Now, who that guy is going to be, I don't know. If we had the same discussion in 2014, we probably never would have dreamed that Wayne Gallman was going to be the guy by the end of the season and have nearly 800 yards rushing. So, at this point, it's going to be by committee, but I bet by midseason it's not going to be by committee. I bet it's going to be. I just think that Dabo kind of likes a guy who's your running back, and I'll say a lot of these guys though going in, have the all around talents that you are looking for. The ability of your running back to catch the ball out of the backfield is now so important. There's so many plays that you have with multiple guys out in pass patterns. We saw what ETN did last year. Sure, his rushing was down, but his receiving yards was way up. I think the yards from scrimmage stat that they keep in the NFL has become more and more important. It probably doesn't get enough attention in college football as it should. Although I say that, ETN made a lot of All-America teams last year without getting 1,000 yards, and it was because of his receiving and his yards from scrimmage statistics. I think Ross did a good job in promoting that aspect of his game.
Yeah, over 500 yards receiving, I think, a year ago, nearly 600 yards for Travis Etienne. And you kind of talk about versatility, too, for these players. I mean, tight end, I don't know if the comparisons of player X to Jordan Leggett will ever go away. It's going to take probably a pretty special talent to stand in at the tight end spot and have the type of impact that Leggett had over his final 2 seasons. Just a real outlet for Deshaun Watson during those 2 years. But when you look at the tight end group, it would appear Tony Elliott shifting over there has got a lot to work with. What are your expectations when it comes down to this group of tight ends for this Clemson team heading into the season?
Yeah, I do agree with you. There's a good group here, 4 guys that are certainly going to have a chance. Now, didn't the tight end position catch 50 passes? Was it last year? Didn't they catch a lot of passes last
Let's
year?
see, 27 for Galloway, 16 for Davis.
Yeah, I think they got to 50.
It was close.
Maybe they'll catch more this year. It depends how much we end up throwing the ball. But I think it's going to be a talented unit. Tony Elliott's going to do a great job with them. I think Galloway can be a type of guy like Leggett, but there's going to be other guys there that deserve a lot of playing time too. So I think it'll probably be more balanced than it was when Jordan Leggett was playing.
Yeah, I tell you, the other thing too, I think, what's really, and Coach Sweeney brought this up, and not so much this year, but down the road, the roster management that these guys are going to be dealing with. And, a guy like Braden Galloway, who lost a season previously due to the whole Ostering thing, can potentially pick up an extra year now with the COVID-19 additional year that every player is going to get. So, from that standpoint too, I just look down the line and think there really doesn't have to be a ton of change, especially at that spot over the next couple of years. I mean, they can really start to build some chemistry between the tight ends and DJ.
Yeah, no, you're totally totally correct. And each guy's got their own aspect of the game. I'm sure Dabble or Tony looks at different guys as better blockers or whatever, and that is that aspect of the game is so important in the tight end position, as it is in the running back position. We really didn't talk about that aspect. I think that's going to be a factor in who gets to be a lot of playing time and can be as a guy. Going to have to be a good blocker, especially helping out in past situations. We saw that was an area of Etienne's game that just improved exponentially over his career.
Final thing I'll ask you, you kind of brought me back to the running backs, and you brought one more thing to my mind that I wanted to ask you about, CJ Spiller, and being a former running back in that role, and what that could mean to that group. You've been around CJ a long time. You kind of know the young man he is, and certainly the impact he's had on this program. But what do you think he can do as a coach? We got about a minute, Tim.
Well, interesting you bring that up, because in the first football program, the South Carolina State program, he's going to be honored going in the College Football Hall of Fame. So I did a story on him for that program, and I interviewed him for about an hour one day last week. And I asked him about the different things that he learned from the coaches that he had in the NFL. And I won't go into it totally because we don't have much time, but I was so impressed with the different aspects of the game that he cited from in particular 3 of the coaches that he played under in the NFL. So I think he's got a lot of lessons to give to his players.
I tell you, I think he's got a long career ahead of him, and look forward to seeing how he develops in that role. I think it's going to be good for him. I think this move could also be good for Tony Elliott to tight ends as well, being a former wide receiver. Tim Bourret's here every Thursday at 5 o'clock. Tim, always great to catch up with you. Can't wait to talk to you next week, and we'll be talking a lot of football then for sure.
Yeah, I plan to go out to practice tomorrow and see a few practices next week, so we'll have a lot to talk about next week.
Yes, sir. Tim Bourret, again on Twitter at Tim Bourret, here every Thursday afternoon. All right, we'll hit a quick break and react. Lots